Welcome to Becoming a Principal, a podcast for aspiring educational leaders. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Matt. Our mission is to inspire and support educators considering leadership roles so they can add value to the communities they serve.
Awesome. Matt, how's your day going?
You know what, just sitting here, nice fall day, seeing all the activity outside, even though it's after school, quite after school, actually.
It is.
And you see what a busy place a high school is. Right? And all the activities that we offer, it's kind of neat.
It's the best. All these students and staff.
And community members who are here, right?
Yeah, utilizing the facility for one reason or another. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
A little hub.
It's heart of the community.
Heart of the community. Yeah, I think it is. All right. So we don't really have a specific topic of focus for this episode today, other than we're going to get back to answering some listener questions. So we're very grateful for our fellow educators that have been reaching out to us through different means. And that was part of the reason that we wanted to do the podcast in the first place. So in episode 12, we did our first listener questions episode, and we're going to dive a bit more into some of those questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. So if you have any questions for us, please DM us on the IG page at Becoming a Principal Podcast, and feel free to send questions or topics that you like to hear discussed on the podcast, or maybe even future ideas, or maybe guests you'd even like to try and see if we could reach out to have on the podcast as well. So we got a few questions or sort of topics that we're going to look at today that we're asked to sort of reflect on or share our insight on. So we're going to do that today. So the first one was asked by one of our listeners was, as a registered social worker, they're personally keen on learning more about how social workers are utilized at a high school level, and how do principals collaborate with this type of support, so with social workers, besides just attendance management. So it sounds like the listener here understands that social workers are involved in attendance management, but what else does a social worker do in a high school setting? It's a great question to ask, because if you're someone interested in pursuing that line of work, it's important to know what you're getting into, because I feel like social workers definitely do a lot. And Matt's going to share a little bit about what he's seen in a social worker role at a high school setting, and then how we kind of collaborate with that person.
Yeah, there you go. And it's interesting, as a high school teacher, you don't have that lens. You get an email once in a while from a social worker checking in on a student or offering some advice, but you don't see that person and how they're utilized effectively in a school. As an administrator, can say that they're definitely one of the people I lean on extensively. Right? When I came into the role a year ago, I had no idea the frequency I would rely on a social worker to help support students with not only attendance but mental health issues, and really they just help me problem solve on an almost daily basis, I would say, navigating different situations, and because everyone's unique, right? So sometimes the social worker is the main point of contact with a family, and they're relaying information to us, or we're relaying information to the family through them. Other times they're connecting family to support in the community and working with those community supports. A lot of the time they're in on parent meetings with me for students who are accessing social worker, and they're helping navigate scenarios like getting a student back to class, or school safety scenarios, anything that might help that student feel safe and academically capable in the school they're working on. And again, they're just such an important tool that we have in order to support students' well-being and academics here while at school.
I think that sums it up pretty well. They're kind of like the, called jack of all trades or Jill of all trades. They really do help us work on the whole student and get to the root of some of the challenges that some of our students might be facing.
Yeah, and they certainly have the language around how to support kiddos who might be in crisis as well.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we should name that. Sometimes that comes to us, and the social worker is there on call for us to use to help students in crisis. And they're just, like you said, that jack of all trades that we can rely on. They're the experts. As an administrator, I'm not the expert on student mental health. We know some things, right? But they're certainly the ones that take the lead in a lot of those conversations and supporting students.
Yeah, absolutely. Supporting students in crisis is obviously an important issue and can be a challenge for administrators who might not be, adept in those situations, especially if you're new to the role. Seeing student in crisis is not something you might encounter as an educator often, but as an administrator, it might be something that you're more likely to see. So social workers are essential in helping students with crisis. And then definitely getting community support, like you mentioned, is probably the biggest one. Connecting them to something outside the school. While we recognize that, and our social workers do too, they definitely work a lot of hours, and they're trying to help students, but they recognize that they can't help them at all hours. And what does that look like? What is their life like outside of school? And how do they build systems for themselves to function in society, not just in the school? So a big part of their role for sure is connecting them to outside supports. One other thing that we didn't mention either is, I don't know, Matt, you might have been through this already, but if we have students that, potential that we need to do a violent threat risk assessment on a student for a myriad of reasons, social workers are also part of that process as well. Yeah. So that's in addition to the attendance management, which people know of. Yeah. We definitely we are very grateful for the work that our social workers provide, and we're very fortunate to have an amazing working relationship with them. Yeah. So yeah, I think it'd be very challenging to do our job without them. What do you think?
Well, it's the necessary function of the school.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Jordan, you ready for listener question number 2?
Let's do it.
So this person recently completed their first year as an educator and have aspirations to become a guidance counselor and school administrator. They would like to hear more about the professional collaboration between counselors and administrators and what that looks like in our practice.
Okay, great. So can we first talk about what being a guidance counselor is all about? You want to go there first?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so I want to address maybe a little misconception a bit about what people do in a secondary setting or high school setting in non-teaching roles. And one of those roles is a guidance counselor. And I think for educators that have spent a lot of time in the classroom, they might not understand all the ways that a guidance counselor is working in a school setting. So first off, I will say that from my experience in working closely with guidance counselors, it's an extremely demanding job for lots of reasons. You might be the first contact for a student that could be in crisis. Families that need support are reaching out to you first. Students that are desperate to get into a certain program at university or college are they're really pursuing you to get the results they need. It's an all-encompassing job. Would you agree?
Yeah, they're the main conduit too with teachers and students' academics. A lot of the time they reach out to the guidance counselor first to see what they know about a student's situation and if there's anything that they can be doing to support. So I would say, our guidance counselors' caseload's in the hundreds, obviously, here. And they know all their students. Yeah, so they're holding all of that information.
They're the caseload. They're the caseload manager, right? They hold a lot of pieces of information about students and their ability to succeed, and it's just it's a very big job. So when we look at teaching roles translating into roles that are sort of non-teaching, I think that we got to be honest and say that they're very different roles, kind of like administrator, especially in the secondary setting, right? What guidance counselor's day-to-day looks like is very different than an educator. Yeah. Right? So in terms of how we collaborate with guidance counselors and our counselors, I think they're essential to our function as well. Similarly, as we talked about with social workers, they hold all the pieces on students. And I can't think of a time where I've gone into a conversation without maybe first checking in with a guidance counselor about any detail I had on a student. What about you? I feel like I'm always doing that.
Yeah, because again, they hold so much information. We don't want to go in blind, right? And they always loop us in too, right? So as we start to work with a kiddo, we're starting to learn more and more information from them. They also go and they're part of those transition meetings from grade 8 to grade 9 to help us plan ahead for some of our students who are coming to us. And without them, we'd be lost. Let's just say it, right?
We'd be lost. Yes, we would. Yeah. and their specific knowledge on like pathway planning and career options for students is so vast. And I would venture to say, just like any role in education, that has changed drastically in the last 10 years in terms of options for post-secondary or to the world of work options for students. I don't think that not that they weren't as knowledgeable back then, but they were probably just less known options for students 10, 15 years ago. Less tracks to take, right? But now there's just so many.
Yeah, actually, that makes me want to just add on to say they always are learning, right? Yeah. The amount of ongoing learning, professional development that they need to do is so important, because we're talking about supporting students not only through high school, but into their futures too. And that's such a, like they're relied on so heavily by not only us as administrators and other teachers, but students and their families.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Families will often connect with a guidance counselor about, course selection, pathways, sometimes even the potential to get into post-secondary programs of their choosing. How do they go about getting into them? What should they be taking? It's a lot of like advice that they're helping provide for families in critical times in families' lives as well.
Yeah. Right. And, I feel like, for some of the questions that might come to us, they usually go to the guidance counselor first, because the family's connected with a guidance counselor, right? So they're like, when a family's in need, they can't buy a uniform, or they're having trouble putting food on the table, or their students not feeling safe at school, or there's, all the concerns that might come to a school, they're usually going through guidance counselors.
Yeah, and in terms of the collaborating part, I do think, so we obviously hold, meetings for caseload, depending on student last name alpha, that we share with administrator and guidance. And there's definitely a lot of collaboration, but I would say a lot of deferring to our guidance counselors in many ways about what they think might be best for the student. Although there are times where we know that, our role is pivotal in making a decision one way or another in some instances, but a lot of decision making is held with the guidance counselor and their professional judgment of a certain situation. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would add there too is, like you were saying, they are the case manager, right? So a lot of the time they're, I don't want to say triaging is the right word, but we're trying to select like who's going to look after different students, and the guidance counselor is taking a lot of those students on to their plate to support them.
Yeah, they're the nexus point.
Yeah, they are.
For a lot of people, like between us, on one side you got like, administrators, but all around them, like it's like a web basically. They got teachers that are, feeding them information about students. They're relaying that back to the students. They're working with the parents and the students themselves. They really are the nexus point for a lot that happens at the school.
And you know what else I notice? Their door is always open for students.
This is true.
Right? So they're always available at the same time while they're still taking care of all the behind-the-scenes work for
Absolutely.
kiddos.
And I guess depending on the school that you work at, different departments carry different responsibilities in the school as well, or sometimes just the culture of the school. So our guidance program area does just so much for our school. If it's running like grade 8 information nights, running our academic awards night, they do take on a lot of graduation. They're obviously essential in as well, like our graduation ceremony. Like it's a big deal. They do a lot. Mm-hmm. So I hope that answered the question in terms of having aspirations to be a guidance counselor and what that's like, and what the collaboration with admin looks like. I think we took care of that one.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
It's ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll also say I'd encourage you to get into it, whoever asked that question, because it's essential. We need people with the right mindset and heart for that work, because it's different work, slightly.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, last question we're going to sort of tackle today is asking about how we engage in courageous conversations, and stating that they know courageous conversations are difficult, but do we have any tips for going into a courageous conversation, how we handle ourselves during it and after it, and how do we go about it professionally, trying to preserve a relationship and coming out of it successfully? So Matt, do you have any things to share in regards to how you approach courageous conversations?
Yeah, that's obviously something that we need to do on a regular basis. But I'm going to start by sharing this piece of information we learned at one of our administrator meetings yesterday. And I kind of feel like I've been doing this all along without any language to it. So first off, when I'm dealing with a parent or a student or a staff member, we need to check that we're both regulated. And if we're not regulated, we need to get them there. So some of the ways I do that is just through small chit chat, if they're open to that first. Sometimes they're not even, right? And you have to let them be unregulated in the moment first. And then we're working on that, regulating the conversation and them later. But then just try to relate to the situation that they're going through. Try to be a good listener and try to show some empathy. And then lastly, then we can have a conversation that's based in reason, because ultimately that's where we want to go. And I think ultimately the goal is, or ultimately we know all parties involved want the best for their child. And to me, I look at it that way. While some may think that there's a better way to go about that, reaching that goal, than what we think, ultimately I'm looking at that we're all on the same page with that piece of information. Now, I should say, too, that it all doesn't go as according to plan, right? And my first week on the job last year, I think a parent and student in the office just laying into me over something I didn't have context for either, because it was the beginning of September. And I just thought to myself, this isn't about me. And this is not something I can hold, even though two people are yelling at me right now. And I think that stance has served me well in the last year, knowing that I don't need to own anybody's anger or frustration or whatever that might be, but I'm helping them solve the problem, right? So when I have that stance, I feel pretty good. I sleep at night.
Yeah.
I don't hold on to that conversation on the drive home.
Yeah.
Like I can just let it go pretty easily, actually. Yeah. And just know that we're just there to help, right? And
Absolutely.
help problem solve.
Yeah.
And that we're not going to be able to own all things. And sometimes we can't solve it either. And we have to be okay with that piece too, right?
It's the hard part.
That is the hard part.
Now, when I read this question, I'm thinking about these kinds of conversations, I think I'm reading this correctly, that you kind of know you need to have and you need to address something.
Yep.
Maybe it's a behavior, maybe it's something that's happening in a classroom, and you need to speak to the teacher about it. And how do you kind of prepare for something like that? So I think what you were speaking to was you found yourself in a courageous conversation by chance that maybe you didn't get a heads up.
Yep.
And you were like, I got to just be real and have a conversation here. So I like the 3 R's. What was it again?
Regulate, relate, reason.
Yeah, I love that. We see that a lot with our students.
Yeah.
We need to get them, because they'll come in a lot of times dysregulated about a situation or whatnot, and we're never able to reason with them if we don't get them regulated. But what about conversations where you need to have, and maybe not that you avoid them, but it's like, I got that one's on my to-do list. Maybe it's not on my to-do list, but I got to get to that one.
Yeah.
And let's just talk about, how about we talk specifically about a staff member?
Okay, let's do it that way.
So how do you approach those? So say, let's just put this little scenario. Let's say you have to have a conversation with a staff member because a parent had reached out to the staff member about something that was happening in class, and according to the parent, wasn't necessarily satisfactory, the results that they got, and you determine that it's time that you need to speak to the staff member about it. How do you go preparing for a conversation like that?
Yeah, well, first off, I have all the information I need, or I feel like I need, right?
Yeah.
Not that I'm trying to do an investigation prior to talking to a teacher,
yeah,
but I have information from the parent, right? Then I feel like the best way for me to go about it is to give the staff member a heads up.
Mm-hmm.
So I call them or I send them an email and say, hey, can we talk about this situation later, at a time that's convenient? Would you like me to come into your space, whether that be me in a classroom on lunch, or they come down to the office? But I feel like giving them a heads up so they're not blindsided and they also have a time to prepare for the meeting has always gone well.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece is every conversation goes better than expected.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some conversations are going to be quite difficult, but they always go much better. However, that being said, I feel like they go better when you have a relationship with the teacher too.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of groundwork that you lay in your day-to-day work, connecting with different people. So when you need to have a conversation, because we're going to need to have those throughout the school year.
You are.
With all different types of staff.
You
staff
are.
that you don't expect to have conversations with about different scenarios that happen in their class, and staff that you do, right? That we need to lay the groundwork and build a relationship with them so they know that they can trust us when we're having a conversation with them. Because again, ultimately, we're trying to help a staff member and a parent and a student in your scenario problem solve a situation. And again, we might not always come to a conclusion that satisfies everyone or all parties,
right.
but we need to be able to get to a place where we can move on.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing is, I think a lot about it in dealing with like conversations that are going to be challenging is that how do you approach it from like a compassionate lens where people feel that you're really focusing on what occurred and not a value judgment on the person.
Yeah,
that's a big one, because I think when you can get to a place where people trust that you are literally just talking about an isolated incident and not placing value judgment on them because of what you might have heard, that they are more open to hearing like feedback or having a real conversation about something.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I've observed, I would say, in my time is that when you come at that conversation a little too hot, there's going to be defensiveness. And then that's not going to move anybody forward, because then you're just both stuck in the mud, right? And while you might feel that conversation, you need to come in hot because if it's maybe it's a high intense issue, maybe it's something pretty contentious. That doesn't usually pan out when you come in with that kind of energy. So I think, like you said, having a relationship with someone prior to, so they know that at least that you're going to give it a fair conversation. You're not coming in with some preconceived notions. However you set that up for yourself, whether it be having that great relationship already, or whether just maybe turning the volume down before you get started with that, right? But knowing that you have good intentions and that you just want to get to like a resolution to move forward is really, really important. But then after, sometimes the question was, how do you preserve the relationship after? And sometimes you don't hit all the marks in those conversations.
Yeah.
Sometimes you miss, and sometimes you leave a meeting, or you feel like it's just not quite resolved yet, or like you can sense that there's some feelings that are still there about it, and that's going to happen sometimes.
Yeah. And just to add on too, like I think, and during the conversation, the goal is always to how are we going to move forward, right? Like it's not necessarily unpacking and going through the scenario over and over again. That's not always helpful. Yeah. Like I like what you said about, just like what are the facts? Like, again, not putting anybody on the defensive, just saying like, this is what I've heard. Yeah. Right. And then how are we going to move forward in this scenario? And then the follow up after. Yeah. Right. So not just letting it end there you're washing your hands of it, but depending on the situation, whether that's going back the next day to see how things have worked out the next week, but just that check in down the road to see like how is whatever we came up with together, and who's going to contact the different people involved. That's right. And then what that's all going to look like. How are we going to wrap it up, and then how did it go? And a lot of times we're just the mediator too. Like we're trying to have people understand maybe their role in whatever transpired, have them reflect on that a little bit. Yep. And that's not easy either, because again, it could lead to defensiveness, but are we able to frame the conversation in a way where it might help someone see the other person's perspective? Yeah. I feel like I've had some success with that sometimes, like, even if it's role playing, like, asking the person to imagine that, you're the parent and this is the only communication that you received about X, how might that sound, even though that wasn't your intention, how might that come across? And I think having those like a chance for them to reflect without being judged, and maybe just a chance to see it from a different perspective if they haven't already, is an important aspect of these courageous conversations as well, because you want people to have a chance to reflect. And I love the conversations that go where people go, yeah, you know what? Okay, I could see where that was a little edgy of me. I could have maybe approached it this way, and that's a good note for me moving forward. And you see that there was some learning there to help them for the next time, because that's important, right? You want them to be able to take something from that conversation and not, get more entrenched in their views, but maybe have an opportunity to reflect and change some outcomes for future conversations, right? Right. Yeah, well said. Yeah. And we're going to have more of those. Yeah, you're right. Lots more. Okay, I got one more question about conversations. Yep. Okay, to put you on the spot here. So have you ever dealt with a parent or a family where you've just had to cut them off and come back to the conversation another day? Have you ever done that?
You know what? I don't.
Just hit the pause button. Is that a tool you've ever?
I don't think I've used that. I think I might have. I don't want to say the word threatened. That's not the right word. But I might have said, I think we're at an impasse. We can't continue this way. We need to bring it to here and focus on this. And if we can't do that, then maybe we need to reconvene another time. But I don't think it's ever resulted in actually reconvening another time. Mm-hmm. I feel like they've been able to, once that was stated, that they were able to bring it back, even if it took time, to what was at hand there. I have had meetings where we decide like we don't have all the information that we need. I'm going to have to get back to you. But it's never happened because of, I would say, like contention that said we got to end this right now at this point. I've been in meetings where I've had a staff member dismissed because we didn't like the way that something was going, and we felt it was in the best interest of the staff member not to be present anymore because of a way a parent was speaking. And that was hard because you want to be able to do things as a team. But when someone is obviously not following the protocol or really being antagonistic to moving things forward because that person was in the room, we felt it was in the best interest for that person to be out of the room and not to be subject to the type of comments that were coming their way. They reconvened later to sort it out, but they needed to be removed at that point because it just wasn't productive. Mm-hmm. So I haven't stopped one and said I'll see you another day, but I've had elements of that happen where we can't continue in this fashion. We got to go back. We got to get back to this, or someone has to leave the room to move things forward. And those aren't ideal, but those you have to make those calls sometimes if it's not being productive anymore. Yeah. Right. And I probably had some meetings I should have stopped. This wasn't being productive anymore, and we've gone in circles, right? That I definitely didn't. I could have navigated better, and I feel like after a bunch of reps, like we're talking about reps all the time, I feel like the more reps you get, the more you're likely to get understand how to get people back on track. Like if things are going off the rails, I think the more reps you have, the better you are able to orient a conversation. And it doesn't have to be like you control it or control the outcome. You just can keep it focused on what the focus that you're trying to have from the beginning, right? I don't know if you've experienced that where you're like, whoa, this is going out of... We just came here to talk about this, and now we're way over here. Has that happened to you before?
Yeah, one time actually, and actually it was a parent meeting with a student, and we dismissed the student to let them go back to class. We noticed that it wasn't being productive with their parent, and just to save the student a little bit, actually, so we could continue the conversation with a parent who was like pretty heated about their child and the way that they were behaving at the school or conducting themselves at the school. But we really were trying to have that meeting to move forward, and the parent wasn't ready to move forward yet or have that part of the conversation yet.
Yeah. Okay, those are all like great points. I think there's a lot to sort of unpack there, but generally speaking, to answer the courageous conversation question is be as prepared as you can be. Yeah. Don't go in with like a set outcome, but go in with a set focus, right? Like here's what we're trying to move forward. You might have your vision of how it's going to end. It might not get all the way there, but you should have some idea of how it's going to go and what you're going to focus on. Yeah. Right. And then at the end, you just have to believe that you did your best, because the relationship might not always be perfect immediately after.
And come back to it afterwards.
That's right.
Do that check-in.
Follow up.
Yeah.
All right. Outro us.
Okay. Well done. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Becoming a Principal. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. We'll be back next week with more stories and advice from the world of school leadership. Until then, keep striving and inspiring.
See ya.